Every year, thousands of people cross a threshold they never saw coming. One moment they're speaking normally, walking normally, living their life, and the next a blood vessel in the brain becomes blocked or bursts, and everything changes in an instant. Stroke has earned a reputation as sudden, unpredictable, almost random in who it strikes. But here's what most people over 65 are never told clearly enough. The circulation feeding your brain right now is being shaped quietly, meal after meal, by choices that either protect it or slowly work against it. Stay with me, because what you learn in the next few minutes could be the difference between reacting to a crisis and preventing one entirely. Let's understand what's actually happening inside your brain's circulation as you age, because this is where everything starts to make sense. Your brain requires an enormous, constant supply of oxygen and glucose, delivered through an intricate network of blood vessels that must remain flexible, clear, and responsive. As we age, these vessels naturally become more vulnerable. Cholesterol can accumulate along artery walls, blood pressure tends to climb, and the delicate lining of these vessels, the endothelium, becomes more susceptible to damage. When a vessel feeding the brain becomes blocked by a clot, or when one weakens and ruptures, the result is a stroke, brain cells deprived of oxygen, dying within minutes, sometimes causing permanent damage to speech, movement, or memory. And here's the part that deserves far more attention than it typically receives. This entire process is heavily influenced by the same everyday factors within your control, particularly diet. Here's where it becomes especially relevant for anyone over 65 specifically. Researchers studying stroke risk have identified something called cerebral small vessel disease, a gradual narrowing and stiffening of the tiny blood vessels deep within the brain. Unlike a dramatic sudden stroke, this process often develops silently over years, sometimes contributing to subtle cognitive changes long before any obvious event occurs, which raises an important question rarely discussed openly. What if some of what gets dismissed as normal aging, occasional memory lapses, slower processing, subtle changes in balance, is actually connected to circulation problems that have been building quietly and potentially could have been addressed far earlier through simple, consistent dietary changes? And here's where the research gets particularly compelling. The first major factor involves potassium, and specifically foods most people drastically underconsume. Leafy greens, bananas, sweet potatoes, and beans are rich sources, and potassium plays a direct role in helping the body manage sodium levels and regulate blood pressure, one of the single largest risk factors for stroke. Large-scale studies tracking older adults found that those with higher potassium intake had significantly lower rates of stroke compared to those consuming diets low in potassium-rich foods, regardless of other risk factors. Think about that for a moment. Something as simple as adding a banana to your morning routine or choosing sweet potato over white rice might be directly influencing the blood pressure regulation responsible for protecting the vessels feeding your brain. But potassium is only part of the picture, because the next factor involves a nutrient most people associate with heart health without realizing its direct connection to brain circulation specifically. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel. These fats have been extensively studied for their ability to reduce inflammation throughout the vascular system, lower triglycerides, and even slightly reduce blood clotting tendencies, a particularly important factor when it comes to preventing the type of clot-related strokes that become increasingly common with age. Long-term studies following older adults found that regular fatty fish consumption was associated with a measurably lower risk of ischemic stroke, the most common type, caused by blocked blood flow to the brain. For someone who has spent years choosing convenience over consistency, the idea that swapping processed meat for grilled salmon even twice a week could meaningfully influence stroke risk carries real, tangible weight. Now here's the piece that tends to surprise people the most because it involves something most associate with taste rather than brain protection. Berries, particularly blueberries and strawberries, rich in compounds called flavonoids. These compounds have been studied specifically for their ability to improve blood vessel function and reduce oxidative stress, the kind of cellular damage that contributes directly to arterial stiffening over time. Research following older adults over extended periods found that those who regularly consumed berries had measurably better vascular function and lower stroke risk compared to those who rarely included them in their diet. It's almost surprising how something as simple and enjoyable as a handful of berries added to breakfast could be quietly supporting the exact vascular flexibility your brain depends on every single day. What makes all of this so emotionally significant isn't only the science, it's what stroke represents for so many people navigating life after 65. There's a particular kind of fear tied to stroke that differs from other health concerns. The fear isn't only about mortality, it's about the possibility of surviving with permanently altered speech, mobility, or independence. Watching a parent, spouse, or friend go through stroke recovery, the frustration, the slow relearning of basic tasks, leaves a lasting impression that quietly shapes how people think about their own future. That fear, often unspoken, sits in the background of countless daily decisions, sometimes without anyone even realizing it's there. But this is precisely why understanding these everyday accessible factors matters so deeply. Because vascular health feeding the brain isn't simply a fixed outcome determined entirely by genetics or bad luck. It's shaped consistently by choices made meal after meal, choices that feel small individually but accumulate into significant measurable protection over months and years. This isn't about drastic transformation or eliminating every food you enjoy. It's about recognizing that specific, ordinary foods, already accessible in most grocery stores, are directly connected to reducing one of the most feared health events associated with aging. None of this replaces medical care, especially for anyone already managing high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, or other conditions that increase stroke risk. Regular checkups, prescribed medication, and professional guidance remain essential, and diet should work alongside that care, not replace it. But understanding this connection offers something valuable, a genuine sense of active participation in protecting your own brain health, rather than feeling like stroke risk is simply something that happens randomly, entirely outside anyone's influence. Think honestly about your own daily choices right now. How much potassium-rich produce actually makes it onto your plate each week? How often does fish appear in your meals compared to processed alternatives? Sometimes the most meaningful protection against something as frightening as stroke doesn't come from a dramatic overhaul. It comes from small, consistent, informed choices, repeated quietly, meal after meal, protecting circulation you can't see but depend on every single moment of your life. So tell me, before this video, did you realize diet played such a direct role in stroke prevention? Or is this a connection you're only now starting to understand? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to know how many of you are ready to start protecting your brain circulation a little more intentionally.